Well, Rosalind, it's good to have you on this podcast. And it was a pleasure. We have spoken, once before, and then kind of gone back and forth on text there on LinkedIn. But everybody is going to get to know that the Deadbeat Chronicles is really about the support of the American family. And what does that mean? It means a lot. I think it's a tremendous amount of conversation. So I jumped on LinkedIn. I'm just starting my process of introductions, and you and I met through their algorithm. Is that how that works? I just typed in there, whatever. So social media does work for good things. Undeniably, it does connect. And Rosalind, let me, if I may, read a little introduction here on you. Rosalind Sedacca, CDC, is a divorce and co-parenting coach. Recognized as the voice of child-centered divorce, she is the founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network, which provides valuable resources for parents who are facing, moving through, or transitioning after divorce. She's also the author of How Do I Tell the Kids About Divorce? It's a Create-a-Storybook guide to preparing your children with love. A co-host of Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living radio show and podcast. Oh, very cool. So you've got the podcast too. I'll tell you what, let's jump on that together. Rosalind is an expert blogger for numerous divorce, parenting, and dating websites and blogs, and wrote numerous ebooks and e-courses on parenting and success strategies for parents. And Rosalind, let's say towards the end of the show, we'll definitely kind of reiterate that and point folks to, all that stuff. And I'd love to give you the floor. It's a pleasure talking with you last week. I look very much forward to chatting with you about a lot of things and hearing what's on your mind about what's going on with families in America.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure talking with you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess, first of all, where you are now, how did your struggle and journey? I'm a guy that don't mean to take it back over here. When I think about saying I'm on a journey and I think about life, I think of it more as a struggle, but I also don't think of that word struggle as a negative thing. We all learned. You didn't get here overnight. We didn't all get here overnight. So tell me a little bit about the very beginnings of your experience in starting CDC.
Yes, Child-Centered Divorce Network. So I was married for close to 20 years, and the marriage was starting to erode, and there was tension and conflict. And we had a son who was 11 years old at the time when I realized I had to end the divorce. I had been putting it off for years and years because you don't want to inflict that on your kids. And I went to therapy and did a lot of inner work and finally realized that there was a lot of stress at home. My son was starting to show signs of stress, headaches, and other symptoms that were not good. And so I finally made the difficult decision to initiate the divorce. And it was a very tough thing to do. My husband at the time was not happy at all about that and tried to keep me from having the divorce. But I knew that it was the right thing after putting it off for years and years. And we learned how to co-parent. This was many years ago, before there was as much support as there is today. And we learned we went through the divorce, we learned how to co-parent, and we raised our son from 11 years old at the time to adulthood. And one day when my son was in his early 20s, he came to me out of the blue, literally out of the blue. And he said, Ma, you and Daddy did a really good job with that divorce. And I just want to thank you, because most of my friends whose parents divorced either hate their parents or are very angry at their parents. And I think you and Daddy were really great. And I just let out a sigh of relief, because I was holding on to so much guilt. Did I mess up my kid, and what was the outcome going to be in his life long term? And so that became a very impactful moment. It became the catalyst for my realizing we did a good job. We learned a lot together. We overcame a lot of obstacles. And I have a lot that I can share with other parents who are going through divorce. So this was years and years after my own divorce, and I founded the Child-Centered Divorce Network and then became a divorce and co-parenting coach. And because my background was in writing, I started writing several ebooks and e-courses and programs to help people who I couldn't coach directly one-on-one, but I could help them get with support information, because the focus of my work is to help parents avoid serious mistakes so that their kids can have the best possible outcome long, long after the divorce, and for the parents as well. And so that's how it all happened. It was an accident, a wonderful accident, because it's become the focus of my life, my passion. And I work nationally and internationally, working with couples either together or individually to help them understand the consequences of every decision they make, so that they could be mindful before making decisions, going through the divorce and then co-parenting after the divorce.
I think that what you're doing is an absolute necessity. And I might also ask, so when you're talking with parents and you're trying to get them to guide through a divorce, where does that come? How do we move that? Sorry to stutter through this. How do we move that to a more proactive place?
So there's parents who are just contemplating divorce or initiating divorce are filled with questions and insecurities and fears and anxiety about what now, what do I do next? And the earlier I can talk to both parents, which I really like to do together, it doesn't always happen that way, but the earlier I could talk to both parents, the easier it is to get everyone to understand that there are better and worse ways of handling the divorce when you're a parent. If you're getting a divorce and you don't have children, I don't care if you beat each other up and make each other miserable for as many months or years as you want to go through it and create that drama. Go at it. But when you have children, you have to be extremely responsible and conscientious about the impact of divorce on your kids every step of the way. Mindful of their age, because there's differences in how kids respond at different ages and stages in life, and mindful of a number of circumstances going on in the family dynamic. And there's certain mistakes that we see repeatedly, so that most every professional will say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, avoid that. Do this, do that. Make sure you're mindful about that. And if parents get that information early on, it could eliminate a ton of conflict. It could eliminate a lot of pain and agony, and especially emotional turmoil for their innocent children, because every child of divorce is innocent, no matter what the cause of the divorce. Even if you're fighting about the kids, it's never the kids' fault. This is adult drama. And what we want to do is make sure we don't lose track of the kids, so the kids don't pay the price for your divorce.
This very much sounds like a philosophy. And how do we get that philosophy, again, more proactive, more into early ages? And I know I'm backing up here and taking what seems like a very big leap that a lot of people understand needs to be taken. And that big leap being a huge shift in how we're raising our kids from a very young age, and then on through adolescence and teenage years and on into young adults. Everything is very competitive. It's not aligned with the last 5 or 6 minutes of what you've been trying to express, which seems like a standard, and a very good one, by the way. A set of virtues and just self-respects, and then respects for others. So what are the vehicles out there? And that almost sounds like a loaded question. What are the vehicles out there that are tearing away from the success of the family in that regard? Why is it such a competitive fight in the process of split and divorce and the competition that leads up to divorce in the first place?
Well, there's multitude of things in our culture and society that create marital issues. And first of all is making poor choices, because our culture isn't focused on qualities and character traits. We're focused more on physical, how attractive people are. And so we get married for the wrong reasons many times, which of course leads to more divorces. But we don't want to get too far off track philosophically. What we want to do is make sure we understand that every decision we make in life has consequences, regardless of what the issues are about. When you're divorcing with children, the consequences are more dramatic than other consequences. And very often divorce is about money, or it's about anger because one person hurt the other person in some way. And we have to take the feelings we have, which can very often be very justified. I was hurt. My ex had an affair. My ex is an addict and is irresponsible and an alcoholic. And there's lots of reasons why relationships break up that are very understandable and sound. But understanding all of that, we have to be aware that when kids are involved, we have to always put the focus on what impact is this going to have on the innocent psyches of those children, because they didn't ask for this. And too often they just fall through the cracks, not because parents are bad, but because they just get so caught up in their own emotional drama that they fail to recognize the pain that the kids are going through. And the reason we know this is because adult children of divorce are very outspoken and talk about it. If you speak to adult children of divorce or read any of the books interviewing adult children of divorce, they'll tell you how their parents were very obtuse about everything. Their parents were so focused on their own hurts and wounds that they were oblivious to the pain the kids were going through. So they made decisions that were poor. They said things that were not very conscientious. The kids were confused or caught between in a no-win battle, et cetera, et cetera. There's just a multitude of things that happen. And so we want people who have children to just be aware that there's another level of responsibility on your shoulders when you're breaking up, and also when you're dating again. Because dating after divorce involves not only the challenges that everyone has dating in midlife and where am I going to find someone who's a better partner and all of that, but when you have kids, the kids' feelings are involved, and it's a dance. It's a dance of being mindful and responsible and aware of what things are like for them as well as for you. So everything is more complicated when children are involved, and that's why that's my area of specialty, wanting to shake parents up before, during, and after the divorce so that they stay on track and they understand there are better ways of doing things. And thankfully, we have wonderful results. We have a lot of times when parents are angry at each other, understandably, and hurt, and wanting to rip each other apart. And then when they both understand that the one thing they have in common is loving those kids, the only thing they have that keeps them together is that they have children who they love and they don't want to see those kids hurt. Well, that bond can help them make much wiser decisions, much more responsible, mature decisions that's going to be better for everyone in the family. And everyone in the family does have a better outcome when you co-parent cooperatively, when you treat each other respectfully, and when you let your kids have the experience of what I call a child-centered divorce, when it just flows more smoothly for them. Does that make sense?
Yes, tremendously so on a lot of levels for me. I don't mean to take this platform immediately and tell a bunch of stories about my past, my own personal childhood, and my thoughts about family and those dynamics for me growing up through teenage years and young adult, and then going through a marriage myself and having a couple of kids and going through divorce. So I know the answer, or I certainly have my own opinions about the answers to the question I'm going to ask you. So what happens when everything that you've just described, that's all of the good suggestions and all of those good things, what happens when everything goes exactly the other way, or those directions, those trajectories are going the other direction? There's the bitterness and the disrespect, the dishonesty, the fight, the positioning, the competition,
Yeah.
and then what happens?
Well, we see it all the time. We see it in the headlines of the newspaper every day. So you know what happens. Bitter disputes, law cases that go on for months or years, bitter battles, kids who can't be in the same room with their parents for an event. Parents can't attend the child's wedding because both parents can't be in the same room, for graduation, for happy times in their lives. We see it all the time, and it happens all the time. And because I focus on parents who have the mindset to say, I want a child-centered divorce because I love my kids more than I hate my ex. That's a huge step forward. For those parents who can't say that, and sadly there are many, I refer them to specialists. There are divorce coaches who specialize in narcissistic divorces, high conflict divorces. There are many of them, and I move on because they don't want to listen to me. What I'm saying sounds like it's a fairy tale, and they're not they don't have the awareness of putting their kids first. It's more important for them to win the battle. So there are lawyers who specialize in litigation who'll take your money and take thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you could have a divorce that goes on and on and on. And so we see it all the time. These are not people who are evolved enough to understand that there are other ways of doing things because there's a family involved. This isn't a business deal. This isn't selling property. This is something entirely different. This is the dissolution of a family. Personally, I believe that divorce shouldn't even be in our legal system. Divorce should be in our mental health system. You
said that last week.
Yes, mental health professionals talking to both parties, empathic, compassionate, understanding, because parties are legitimately hurt. I'm not saying that we're not hurt and wounded and there's not a lot of stress and turmoil and anxiety and bitterness and hatred and shock and all kinds of emotions are happening. Absolutely. And very often there's one party who's more responsible. Sometimes both parties are just crazy and they just fight and pull into each other and create more turmoil. But whatever it is, if you have kids, you have to step away into another level of understanding, because the conversation that I try to steer people into is we are and always will be a family. And this is we're changing the form of our family. We can no longer live in one house together, and life's going to be easier if you spend some time in mom's house, some time in dad's house, or whoever the two parents happen to be. And when you're with one parent, you're going to have happy times with that parent. When you're with the other parent, you'll have happy times, and life will be smoother and happier because there's going to be less conflict and tension of living at home. However, we are still a family. We will always be a family. Your mom will always be your mom. Your dad will always be your dad. And life is going to go on, and there's going to be happy times ahead. And we're going to look forward to birthdays and school events and graduations and marriages and grandchildren and all of those things, because they are ahead, and they can be done in a happy way, or they can be done in a way that's hurtful for everyone involved. And these are choices. So if you get into the hands of a lawyer who's into, we're going to win at all cases and I'm going to tear that person apart and destroy your ex, well, then you're going to have a divorce where you're both being destroyed by the kinds of attorneys who are doing that. I vet the people on my website so that they're only child-centered professionals, and I don't have any attorneys who are into that mindset, because if you're going to one of them, they're going to get you into that kind of a divorce. And the sad part about it all is that an attorney is only there to get you through your divorce. One day your divorce ends, you have papers, you say goodbye to that attorney, and then you are moving on to a lifetime of co-parenting. But that attorney may have put you into a deeper, darker hole of hating your ex more than you hated them before you started the divorce. And there you are. And there's a very high suicide rate for divorce attorneys, because it's a profession that really is emotionally and psychologically damaging when you're moving people on in a direction that really isn't focused on their well-being. You're making money at the cost of these families' lives. So it's very important to move towards mediation and what's called amicable divorce, collaborative divorce. There are ways of having more peaceful divorces, starting with the right attorneys or starting with the right mediators so that you're not getting into litigation. Again, this isn't for everyone, but for those who are fortunate enough to listen to what I'm saying, the outcome is usually better. And the kids will thank you when they're grown adults, like my son did with me. And I have lots of clients who will, who have been saying that. I have testimonials all over my website, and clients who will say, thank you for steering me in this direction because our lives are working out better. And that's what the passion that I have about this topic is why I continue doing it, is because it's rewarding to see those better endings, knowing that people were steered in a direction that's going to be better for them for the rest of their lives.
And Rosalind, you had your divorce and approached your son very originally with the announcement you were getting a divorce. How many years ago was that?
Oh, back in the 90s, long time ago.
So,
and there wasn't a lot of support back then at all. So everything I did was intuitive, and fortunately, it worked out well.
And what I'd love to segue into is, so back in the 90s, and obviously there had to have been something well before that instilled a bit of a ego death. And I kind of coined that phrase, steal that phrase from some other guys I talk with, that ego death, right? That getting rid of, putting the ego aside, putting that competitive ego aside, and realizing that there are other things besides ourselves to consider in life before we enter a project, let alone dissolving a project. And in this case, I called project marriage. And I don't forget those words. So we're going into a situation with the thought process that divorce is an option, rather the thought process of how are we building ourselves up. And when I say ourselves, I mean our nation, all of us. How are we building ourselves up into self-confidence, humble, vulnerable, respectful, deeply, deeply emotionally intelligent people? And we're going to do that I think in a collaborative way. Why are we fighting so much? Why are we dividing so much? Why isn't everyone having these conversations well before marriage? Why isn't that the story of marriage in America? Why is there such a drive to sensationalize divorce, sensationalize single parenting, sensationalize powerful attorneys? That's the solution. You got a problem, run right to an attorney. I'm not saying that there aren't some really good, very passionate men and women in the family law field. But if that family law field is apparently a $50 billion a year industry in North America, what do we got to do to take and create or move that 50 billion over into a more proactive training and teaching and supporting of virtues in younger ages of kids, so that when those generations grow up, they're turning into much more powerful marriages that stay together longer, and much more respectful situations if they don't. So, you know what I mean? The vehicles that are out there are very destructive. And if the mental anguish and the mental damage is really out there, let's talk about it more. I was about to say, why aren't we talking about it? Let's keep talking about it more and more and more, and bring some real reform, some real serious reform, because there's some real damage going on. And it has been for a long time,
right?
40, 50 years.
And long. We live in a culture focused on competition and greed. And the schools are not allowed to do a lot because we have legislators interfering with the school system who aren't concerned about education, because there are schools that are talking about meditation, that are talking about being kind, that are talking about other values besides just competition and greed, but it isn't part of the American culture. And as long as competition and greed are the things that we respect the most, we're going to get the outcomes we have now.
Yeah. And have had for a long time. It's progressively getting worse, and it's perpetuating. And the challenge is, we're biological creatures, and for a long time now, we've been battling technology. It's unavoidable. It's not going away. It's only going to grow. You and I are 100% benefiting from it right now on this, Zoom podcast, video, chat. You can tell I'm a techie guy, but yeah, there's a lot of strife. There's a lot of things that are taking the whatever. I don't know if anyone is religious here or not, so I don't know. Whatever God or the gods had planned for someone's length of life, it seems like the trajectory of what's going on with society is distracting us every single day, many times a day, from the lives that we're meant to live.
Yeah, that's why the word mindfulness is becoming so recently used, because it means stopping and thinking about choices before you act, before you speak, before you do anything, and having conscious awareness. People are not asked to do that, trained to do that in school, and so they know nothing about that, and so they just react rather than respond, and that takes our educational system. And the educational system it's not the educators who are at fault. It's the people who are running the show, who are not letting other values. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are not the only things that matter in a society and a culture, especially in family relationships.
How have you gotten the word out into those arenas, those educational arenas? I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they said, Jeff, guys like you and I, we don't have acronyms after our names. We don't have degrees or certain certifications that would even get us in the door at certain jurisdictional levels, educational levels, school districts, counties, commissions, things like that. So how have you, I was going to ask, how do we, but how have you gotten the child-centered divorce messaging out into younger ages, in groups, clubs, school districts, all of the above?
I can't any more than you can. I'm not in that universe, and when you try, it's very, very difficult. The people who find me by on the internet, by Googling divorce, parenting, co-parenting. They've heard of child-centered divorce. I post on social media every day, but primarily it's word of mouth. Other colleagues, I have a big community of colleagues who like and respect my work and will refer clients to me because they know these are people for whom it makes sense. And that's basically how I work. I don't individually have a structure to do anything in changing our systems and our societies. But
well, why doesn't it make sense for everybody?
It does make sense for everybody, but no one has the power at this point to shift and change what's become political systems and just systems that are beyond the realm of shaking up. So the good part, because there's plenty of negatives in social media and the internet, but the good part is that people who do have a message that resonates are being addressed. I'll have a post and 100 people will respond and say something good about it, and that may reach another few hundred people who are connected with those people. And so the word gets out when people are looking for specific help. Unfortunately, they're looking for help already. And that's the good thing that's happening, that people who do want help, by fortunate accident, I named my business Child-Centered Divorce. If you are into hating your ex and wanting to just destroy her life, you are not attracted to child-centered divorce. So I'm not going to see you because you're not going to contact me. But there are people who see child-centered divorce. They're worried about their kids right from the get-go. They contact me. They say, I read your website. I like what you're saying. I like the information. Your message resonates with me. Can you help me? And that's the only way it's been working, on a very one-by-one level of people referring to me, telling their friends or neighbors, and people finding me happily in one way or another on the internet. But I'm not going to change the apple cart. There are organizations. Amicable divorce is a brand new format for divorce where attorneys can become certified in that. And it's a very peaceful kind of divorce. Collaborative divorce is another one that's been around for even longer. And there are people who are, just by the name, are attracted to these kinds of things. They read the website, they understand that they're talking non-confrontational, lower conflict, lower insanity. And there are very wonderful examples of happily divorced families, couples. I danced with my ex at my son's wedding, and we have a beautiful granddaughter, and we see her all the time together. And I see my ex over the holidays when I visit my son. And our lives are very smooth and easy. We're very fortunate. Not everyone can do that, but I have lots and lots of examples of clients that I've worked with and other colleagues of mine have worked with who have happy divorces. I know a couple, he was a psychologist, but he and his ex divorced. They moved next to each other. They bought two houses side by side, and the kids, while they were growing up, just ran from one house to the other, and it was no big deal for them. The adjustment can be very minimal when the parents make it that way, when you don't say, oh, this is wrong, you can't do this. So I know other couples who vacation every year together. They're divorced, they take their new spouse, and they and the kids, all of them, have a vacation together somewhere. Who's to say that's bad or wrong? Only people who can't fathom such a thing happening. So there are many people who are doing it very successfully. They just aren't in the headlines. They're not in the headlines. You're not reading about them. You're only reading about the extreme cases. And that's why everyone gets the idea that divorce is some kind of a nightmare. It doesn't have to be, and that's the good news.
It doesn't. The taking the reverence out of certain institutions is the absolute root of these problems in ripping apart the family, and removing the authority of the father is absolutely a huge driving force to that. And
I don't think anyone is trying to remove the authority of the father. I think that's an interpretation that gets spread out there. And I am very sensitive to neither siding with either gender, because there are terrible fathers and terrible mothers out there. And I
mean that metaphorically. More so the parent, removing the authority of the parent and giving it to entertainment, social media, the state.
I don't think anyone's intentionally done it. It's happened. Social media has done a lot of that, but no one is intentionally removing the authority of the father. So we don't want to make statements like that. What we want is for both parents to feel valued long after the divorce, if kids are involved, and that the more both parents are together in the process, the better the outcome's going to be. And there's one thing I want to stress here, because it's very important and very simple. There's two gifts that you can give your kids if you're having a divorce. And the first is the ability, the freedom to love both parents without feeling guilty or shamed or blamed for loving the other parent who you may hate. If the kids have the freedom to just love both parents, say nice things about both parents to the other parent, and just have that freedom. That's a gift you're giving your kids. And the other side of it is the freedom for both parents to love the kids. Very often you'll have a very angry parent who alienates the others, badmouths the others, so that the kids are no longer able to see one parent. It's one of the worst mistakes that and outcomes in divorce. It's dramatically horrible. And kids deserve, parents deserve the right to love their kids, even if they've made mistakes and even if they've hurt you. That doesn't mean it's the same thing for the kids. So if you give them the right to love their kids, to love both parents, and give both parents the right to love the kids, you're starting off in a healthier realm. Either of those mistakes is going to destroy emotionally and psychologically the children, and also a lot of effect on the parents. So it's a simple thing to keep in mind, and it starts everyone on the sound foundation of sanity in moving ahead in the process.
I agree. In so many more ways than one do I agree with everything you're saying. And what I'd submit to you is that I truly do believe that there are multiple entities and movements and drives to absolutely remove the parent, remove the authority of the parent in the household. I believe in entertainment. I believe advertising. I believe woke culture and things way before woke culture. Absolutely. And I actually do believe sincerely that there's a movement to discredit the American male. Now, is it the right way? Does everybody do it? No, of course not. Is that the directions you're talking about? Oh, of course not. But I absolutely do believe that those forces are out there. I don't believe it's conspiratorial at all. I believe it's right in our face. And I believe that those vehicles, if you will, are dangling carrots for people with ego issues and or narcissism and bitterness and anger to go and really leverage to hurt the other party. Male and female, I believe, is irrelevant. Husbands, wives, moms, dads, the programs that you're talking about, these collaborative and or what was the name to give them credit?
Amicable divorce.
Amicable divorce and collaborative divorce.
Mm-hmm.
You're exactly right. Those two names sound very attractive to me. So I'll definitely check those sources out and make some introductions there. But yeah, I do think that there is a very communist approach going on many different mediums that are affecting our country and have been for a long time. I don't believe it's fantasy. And I believe that the messaging that you're talking about should be leading the way. It should be absolutely leading the way in conversation and being very, very popular instead of, I believe that should be sensationalized. I believe that your dialogue, your thought process, along with a great many others, I'm sure you would agree, align with that.
Yes, absolutely. And
I think that's where the sensationalism should be.
Most of woke culture is on my side, is in alignment with me. So I have a lot of respect for woke culture because they're saying things that are about love and compassion and caring and understanding and not just tearing the family apart. So I have a different perspective about that.
On which I see woke culture as being very accusatory and opinionated and unwilling to grow. I see them being very short form, not long form.
I think you're right. There are people within every side and dimension who are off target or who are too extreme, and we always need to come back to balance in our society and culture. So that's how we can respect one another. If you get too extreme, don't respect one another. But I
agree. And maybe the woke, maybe the terminology woke, because on the surface, woke, it's like, hey, let's wake up, let's surrender, which in Eastern philosophies means grow and learn. Surrender in Western philosophies means, oh, give up, you died, you were defeated. So maybe our connotation a little bit of woke in the verbiage is a little off, but I bet we align each other in a lot of ways. I think that some of the again, I see it as very in first position before awareness. I see accusation. I see immature accusation leading the way. Is there some intelligent people in there and some intelligent conversations? Yes, look at you and I right now having a very intelligent conversation about it. So I don't politics. Let's touch on that for a minute, especially in America. How divided are we right down the middle because of the way someone votes? And that is definitely due to short form and or very polarized media, mainstream media, even cable media. Not a lot of people are having conversations like you and I are intelligently that might be on the other side of an opinion and or even a political party in direction. And I think that personally, I think that the U.S. government has gotten so far away from we the people that it doesn't matter what side someone's on, right, left, this, that, whatever. The procedures that are going on at a lot of regional and state and federal levels are just not in touch with we the people anymore. It's a machine that doesn't communicate like you and I are communicating right now. It just doesn't. And I'm not a political expert. Here I am complaining about it. I will admit I don't have a bunch of resolutions towards that other than personal responsibility for all of our people. We, the people, really matter. And I think there is an absolute attack on us from so many different levels, so many different angles, so many different sectors. And to put the power, and I do mean the power. You said a little bit earlier that we or there's not a powerful enough entity to kind of go against the courts and the divorce mechanisms. And I'd submit to you again that the power, putting the power back in the house, is the home of America, is where it needs to be. So how do we do that? Number one, talk about it. Two, talk about it to who? Springboards. Who are our springboards? The counselors, the school districts, the politicians, the people in the powers that be that have the platform to, talk about these things and attack it. Like attack it, not attack it to destroy it. No, that's not what I mean by that. But I mean, approach it seriously. Like there's a real problem in your own house. You're going to let that fester. So I do see a definite set of movements, and I won't call it politically left. I won't call it politically right. I think it is a mechanism that is very much on purpose, and it's a real challenge and pull against the success of our families. And I think that messaging like yours, I really credit you for, 20 plus years ago, going through an incredibly emotionally hard time, which how many people that, let me start over. Every single person that goes through divorce, minimum 80% is got to be extremely successful. And I have no basis on that statistic I just threw out there. It's just, we talk to people, right? We talk to people in everyday lives and we hear their stories, and they're usually not pleasant, and they're usually competitive. And the one person that you were playing, the family that you were playing cards with or going out to the lake and water skiing with and having a good time, 6 months later, now they're just completely ripping each other apart and all these things. And it seems to be somewhat the norm. It's like, so I'm definitely going to keep talking about things like this. I think your message is hugely, and your messaging resources are incredibly needed, necessary, required. I really do, along with so much content that I very much do look forward to you introducing me to. I'm sure we'll keep in touch. I'm sure we'll be on together, and all that stuff. Rosalind, what are some great takeaways for us? What we've talked about a lot of valuable stuff, and I think a lot of people would agree with every single thing that I would like to think that both of us have said in the support of families, maybe not some politics here and some woke this and whatever. I don't really, that's not the real focus. Those are distractions. So
Right.
as far as some takeaway insights, what would you tell me? What would you tell our viewers about how to best make the very best situation out of a potential divorce?
So first, we have to remember that we as parents are role models for our kids, divorced or not. Our kids are watching and learning. They don't necessarily say, but they're watching and learning. And ultimately, they're going to hold us responsible for how we parented them. And so it's very important to think before we act on any parenting decision, and be aware of what are we showing them and teaching them, because we could lecture brilliant things. All of us are very bright and intelligent when we're lecturing, but then we move ahead the next minute. What comes out of our mouth? How do we speak to our spouse? How do we talk to people in the neighborhood? Our kids are learning from us. So we have to remember the responsibility of being role models is tremendous. And we have choices in every decision we make. And if we think first and before we act, we're going to make better choices. And the more we can show our children by example the way to be cooperative with one another, learn, be able to apologize to one another and own something and say, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't think that through. I shouldn't have said that about your dad. I shouldn't have told you that about your mom. Those kinds of things are really important for the kids. So it gives kids permission to learn to apologize. It gives kids permission to say, oops, I made a mistake and the world's not going to end. I can change and shift now. So be aware of what you're showing your kids and teaching your kids. That's a hugely important message for everyone to take away, and can start immediately in interacting with our children of any age, whether they're young or adults. And you want to understand the fact that they will hold you responsible. So I ask clients very early on to ask themselves this question: what are our kids going to say about how we handle this divorce when they're grown adults? Because it's very hard to imagine when you have a 5-year-old or even a 15-year-old that they're going to grow up and be adults and hold you accountable. It's hard to imagine that, but they will. We all know that. And kids really get very angry and are very deeply hurt. And some of them will sever their relationship with you when they're grown adults because they were so hurt and wounded. Or some of them don't want to have relationships with and marry or go on in life and have love relationships because they were so hurt in childhood. So
some of the relationships are severed in the childhood years, and not only from one parent, then one parent's got most likely brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and grandpas and grandmas that are also unfortunately pulled away, and that estranged relationship affects the entire family, and the destruction now. I truly believe that it is emotionally abusive to bury the kids in that constant fear and anger and anxiety. And like you say, if there's ever a family event going on, there's any number of actual things that could happen. Maybe the child just doesn't invite one parent all the time, but that child knows they have a parent that loves them very much. So they have to carry that baggage. Call it resentment, call it dishonesty, call it, it could be a lot of different things, is what I'm saying, from one situation to the next, but none of it's positive. It's all emotional baggage. It's all negative. And someday that's going to come back and rear up in a negative way.
yeah.
And oftentimes it is in another failed marriage, and generational trauma, generational abuse. It just keeps perpetuating. And it seems like as a nation, we're talking about it less and less. And the form is becoming shorter and shorter. Attention spans are becoming shorter and shorter. And everyone's talking about it. Hey, look, hey, everything's shortening. Advertising used to be 5-minute long infomercials when black and white TV first came out. Now the commercial is in and out in 9 seconds. And so there's a lot of moving parts to it. There's media, there's technology, there's spirituality, there's personal responsibility, self-discipline. How important is that one? And I don't sit here and say, hey, self-discipline, like I've been the most self-disciplined guy my whole life. I mean, and we struggle every day to stay on the routine and discipline. Every day we're you and I are on this video chat right here, and we are, I don't mean to position myself on a podium like I'm some sort of anything from a Dr. Phil to a religious leader or something. I'm a normal guy. I have my own emotions. I have my likes and dislikes and my fears and insecurities, and I try my best to respond to them as I go through life instead of react to them. But man, emotions are real, and it's hard not to react sometimes. And going through a divorce and or real family problems and heartfelt stuff, it changes the way we act. Yeah, it changes other people's perception of us, and right. It changes what other people think our intent is when we react instead of respond. So and Rosalind, I know that I have taken you right up to an upcoming appointment you've got. So once again, here, I want to identify real quick. Here's some places to find you. Where are the best places to find you? And I want to talk about your podcast too.
Thank you. Very simple. My website is Child Centered Divorce with an ED, childcentereddivorce.com. And everything that I offer is there. One-on-one coaching, ebooks, e-courses, and programs on anger management for co-parents, breaking the divorce news to kids, dating after divorce, everything in between, success strategies for co-parenting. It's all in that one place. So you could find me very simply. I'm on the Going Solo Network, my podcast, Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living with Rosalind Sedacca. So if you go to the Going Solo Network, I'm on most of the podcast platforms that you're familiar with. I'm there on all of them. So just put my name in. And I have a free ebook right on the homepage of Child Centered Divorce, Post-Divorce Parenting, Success Strategies for Getting It Right. And all you have to do is go to the homepage at childcentereddivorce.com, enter your email address, and instant download of the ebook.
Awesome. I will definitely put some links in the comment sections below on wherever, this podcast is also getting distributed and everything. So it's a pleasure speaking with you. I know I'll talk with you many, many times in the future and all that stuff. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to talking with you again very soon.
Thank you, Jeff. It was a pleasure.
You got it.